racists, agnostics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Michael Baranowski, a professor of political science at Northern Kentucky University. I'm joined today by my conservative counterpart, Cleveland area attorney and defender of freedom, Jay Carson.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Jay. And so how are you this afternoon?
Pretty darn good. I actually, you know what I did? I worked from home today.
Well, that's nice. Yeah, you probably don't get to do that.
Which sort of, no, I usually don't. And I'm a traditionalist in most all things, right? And I think, a man ought to get up and go to the office. But today I had to have, work done on my car. So.
Wow. Well, very cool. I got to say, I've had a weird few weeks. I'm a stubborn person at times, sometimes to my own detriment, and a while ago I came down with a thing. It doesn't matter what the thing is, but it's a thing. And so I texted her, I messaged my doctor and said, I got this thing. And she said, well, take this drug. And I said, essentially, no, I don't want to do that. Instead, I'll go on the internet and find ways to fix myself. And she probably would think at that time, well, why the hell did you talk to me in the first place then if you were just going to find some weird TikTok cure for your thing? And my answer is I don't know, because I'm stubborn and sometimes not a
stooge to big pharma.
Exactly. I know that as long as if I just put enough apple cider vinegar in me, I'll be fine, or whatever it is. I don't know. But anyway, so.
I think I have a whole variety of issues, but all of them are just one of those, just rest and put some ice on it and take ibuprofen.
Yeah, it'll be fine, or it'll kill you.
There's nothing that's there's nothing that,
exactly.
There's no quick cure for.
That's for being old. No, that's just,
exactly.
It's a degenerative disease that will kill you. So anyway,
it is. It's all dumb overuse kind of,
I hear you.
Weekend warrior type of thing. So.
Oh yeah. Anyway. Okay. Well, so I want to, speaking of old people, Joe Biden, he got some bad news recently, even though, there was these elections in the last week or so that gave Democrats some good news. That bad news was a New York Times Siena College poll of 6 key battleground states in which Donald Trump leads in 5 of the 6, and not by little amounts in some, +4 in Pennsylvania, up 5 in Michigan and Arizona, 6 in Georgia, and 10 in Nevada. Biden's only advantage is a lot smaller, +2 in Wisconsin. So that seems like now it is a year to the election, but those are almost certainly the 6 closest states, or expected to be. Jay, when you saw those top line numbers, before we dig into the details, what did you think?
I was a little surprised. I would have thought that they would have been closer. I would have thought that there would have been fewer people, sort of a shy Tory effect, who'd be willing to say they would vote for Trump, right? But that's certainly not good news for Biden. It's also one of those things where some of it you can say is the economy, right? You could argue, well, people are still stinging from inflation, and you can say, well, the inflation rate's gone down, which it has. But it's not that, so there's been deflation, just the rate of inflation has decreased. So there's that, and maybe that gets better, right? Mortgage rates dropped significantly just the other day. So there's the sense that, I get that. But his other bigger problem is that he's old, and he's not going to be any younger a year from now. And the likelihood of him getting older is 100%. The likelihood of his age showing even more, I think, is high. So I think that's the bad news. Is most of the problem is it's not a problem that he can fix.
Yeah, I would tend to agree.
A lot of ice and ibuprofen and
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
apple cider vinegar, like we were just talking about.
There you go. Yeah, we should maybe send them a bottle of Bragg's, or I should at least. But if you take a look at some of the numbers, in 2020, 34% of respondents in a poll said Biden is too old to be president. Now it's 71 compared to 18 up to 39 for Donald Trump. And so that's a That's a huge deal. And like you said, that's something he can't control. Now, the economy is clearly a bigger issue. The folks in the survey indicated it was by far the most important issue to voters. And you're right, Biden
usually is.
Yeah, Biden doesn't do well on that issue. They said 59 to 37% trusting Trump over Biden on economic issues. And I think there's that whole Bidenomics thing, right? And it's like, what exactly is Bidenomics? Well, Joe Biden wants people to see it as, I think, he would argue, his successful attempts to sort of invest in regular people. Republicans want to see it as kind of crazily reckless spending and that. But whatever it is, it's a PR bust. It has not worked. I mean, as a messaging tool, right? And I think you're right. I mean, if we look at a lot of the economic figures, they look much better than they did a year ago. And they're also on the right trajectory. There was, a year ago, we were all certain, almost everyone was certain there was going to be a recession. And now that seemed to somehow not happen. And so I think Biden.
You also said inflation would be back to 2%.
You're right, and it's nuts. It's like 3 point something. So higher than but still obviously a big drop. I mean, unemployment is at a ridiculously low rate, and so a lot's going well. And I think what Biden is betting is that there's a lag between that improvement and voters' perception of a better economy. And a year out, that's not so much of an issue, essentially, right? And again, age thing aside, I think he also thinks, well, the focus is on me as president, but once we start running things like I mentioned in the weekend show, Donald Trump saying, I got the big win. I'm the one who can give you the 6-week abortions, that sort of thing. If not for me, that's an issue I think Democrats feel good about, right? But even so,
I don't think Trump's going to. I mean, he was putting that out there because that was the news of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And
after Election Day, I don't think he's going to run on that. He's going to run on, here's what gas cost when I was president, and here's what your grocery bill was when I was president, and here's what it is now.
And Trump voters don't punish him for being inconsistent or even being incoherent. I mean, that's pretty clear. And if you take a look at that base, will definitely and will probably vote for Donald Trump, that was average in those 6 states, 45%. For Biden, it was 40, meaning that Trump's base is clearly stronger, more sort of baked in.
Motivated, yeah.
Exactly, right? And now, I think you might have mentioned this, or we talked about Nikki Haley in the weekend show, right? Nikki Haley actually does a lot better against Biden than Donald Trump does. She leads in all 6 of those states by an average of around 9 to 10, but I don't think that matters because she doesn't make it through the primaries, basically. And I expect you would agree with that.
Probably. But if I'm Nikki Haley, I start flogging those numbers out there saying, look, here's the thing. Do you want to be able to have Trump making snarky comments and own the libs and all that kind of stuff, or do you actually want to win?
Though, of course, Trump could point to this.
I think that's.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but Trump. For all the talk, I mean, Trump has lost, 4 straight elections. So I think there is a contingent that if they're convinced someone else can really win, might be willing to jump ship. I don't know that it's there yet because it just hasn't kind of crystallized yet. You know what I mean? It's sort of there's almost it still seems too hypothetical.
And maybe so.
But,
yeah.
And it may always remain hypothetical. You may be right that his lead in the primaries is just insurmountable. But I do think there's something to be said for, let's actually sit back and look at the numbers of people you are. If I'm a Republican strategist, and I kind of am in my spare time, I would say, look, let's look at who is most likely to beat Joe Biden, because otherwise, anything can happen with Donald Trump. You understand, again, these criminal things, some of them are worse than others, but I think that's a big problem. And also, Donald Trump is 78. Now, certainly, he's seems to be in better shape than what Joe Biden is. But I think if you impress upon voters the direness of the situation of if you lose, it's 4 more years of Joe Biden and or Kamala Harris. Now what do you think? Here's the numbers with Nikki Haley. Now, what do you think?
John, who joins us today, makes an interesting point. Says he tends to agree with Jonah Goldberg that both parties are behaving as if they want to be minority parties and catering to their extreme base, that sort of thing. And I think that's true, but I also think that's just a function of the system we have for choosing our candidates. The primary system is largely run or participated in by the most extreme, most engaged parts of the electorate. So it's not surprising you would get these sort of results.
Well, but then again, take a look at, because we had this conversation a while back, right? Republican nominees, going back to the 90s, George H.W. Bush. Now, again, you can say, well, look, he was the vice president, he was the heir apparent and so forth, but he still had to fend off a challenge by Pat Buchanan, sort of a little boomlet of a challenge by Buchanan. Then, Bob Dole. Well, Bob Dole wasn't, is he a firebrand right-wing extremist? No. In fact, the criticism was that he wasn't strong enough, that he was sort of wishy-washy. Then you got George W. Bush. Now, I would say he was more conservative, but still not the most conservative. And I think a lot of conservatives grouched about too much spending. After that, John McCain, who's like a maverick who does whatever he wants to, right? And sort of ran against, the hell with all of you kind of thing. Then Mitt Romney. Again, what I'm saying is none of these folks, until you get to Trump, would you consider extremists.
And so your argument is, I would say your argument and your hope is that the Trump thing is sort of a longer boomlet and will eventually fizzle.
Yeah, I'm saying most of the time, parties go for who they do believe is the most electable.
I think that used to be true, but it seems like when I look at a lot of the candidates, I mean, especially I think of all the races that Republicans should have won. I mean, Republicans should, I would think, have a majority in the Senate right now, but they don't because of exactly that, nominating people who had a decidedly worse chance of winning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm talking presidential candidates.
Okay.
Because I think your mileage may vary from state to state, right? Part of that depends on, the bench strength that you've got in the state and so forth. And again, I think in Georgia in particular, there was a lot of bad decision making there, and there was Trump injecting himself into the race, which made it a problem. And I think where was another? Pennsylvania was, again, just there was a horrible candidate who was drafted because he was sort of the Trumpian sort of guy, and that's what I mean when I say Trump losing so many elections.
Yeah.
In Ohio, J.D. Vance won sort of improbably, and I think that's more just the momentum of Ohio is mostly a red state, he ran and his opponent didn't run a great campaign. So, well, no, I shouldn't say that. Ryan, I think, ran a decent campaign.
Just in a bad
what I'm saying is a lot of these congressional candidates, actual mileages may vary by where you are. But if you're looking at the larger Republican electorate of who they pick as their presidential nominee, it tends to be someone who represents a cross section of the party.
Well, I certainly hope you're right about that.
And as a result, it ends up nobody's ever really happy with them. I think that's another thing of, I think you always, how is it? Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line.
It used to be the case, but now it seems like it's been the opposite since 2016.
But sort of again, with Trump being the exception and the old Obama, giving the chill down the leg kind of thing. And yeah, most most Republicans, I would say, don't get that over any candidate. The exception perhaps being Trump now.
Right. And so, I mean, and again, this goes back to something we've talked about a lot in the past is I tend to believe or actually fear, both would work, that the Republican Party has transformed in a fundamental way toward the sort of nativist extremist sort of thing. And you believe and hope, and I hope you're right, that that's not the case. And this is a short-term thing. And we'll certainly find out after the 2024 election, I would expect.
I would say I think it probably remains to be seen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an open question.
I do think, I don't say this on the weekend show because, you kind of rambling, but because this was just something I was thinking about earlier today. There is sort of a lack of seriousness that troubles me. There are a lot of Republicans and I've been looking at this for a long time, and I read a lot of history stuff, and there've always been, sort of sleazy politicians, and there've always been, folks who were sort of the showboaters and, all hat and no cattle type thing. But I think more than before, and this from both parties, there tend to be candidates who are just not serious people, if you will, right? If you remember the hit on George W. Bush was that he lacked gravitas, right? And good Lord, I mean, you can have that kind of gravitas, a little bit of that back, compared when you look around Congress right now, that you've got a lot of folks who are just unserious and just plain weirdos in some case.
Right, Jim. In the old days, a guy like Jim Trafficant from your old stomping grounds used to stand out, but now
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So one thing you mentioned earlier is Trump conviction, and I should point out in that survey, things change a lot. They asked the question of, well, what happens if Trump is convicted and sentenced to prison? I think that part's important. So that's been left out in a number of the reports on this I've seen. Now, if under those conditions, Biden leads in all 6 battlegrounds by an average of 10 points. And so, I mean, Donald Trump is been charged with 91 felonies in various cases. And one would think, well, prosecutors probably won't go 0 for 91. I think that was the argument May made last week, right? They're going to get him on something. I mean, but it's not necessarily getting him on something. It's getting him on something before the election.
Yeah.
And
also,
I think the
timing. I don't know that it, yeah.
And also Trump going to prison, because I don't think when people hear convicted, it's like, well, convicted, but he's appealing and he's not in prison. And so I really think that when people hear that question, they think Donald Trump behind bars. Yeah. And that's a very different thing than a jury.
I don't see that happening before the election.
Yeah, because I mean, you take a look at the Georgia,
just the timetable.
Yeah, the Georgia thing. Willis is hoping it will start early March. Says it could take 4 months. So best case scenario for that wrapping up late summer 2024. But I think it's going to be longer than that, right? And then there's this federal election interference case. That's March 4th, right? Yeah, I mean, and maybe but he'd be a first-time offender. Judges would take into account the age. There are no mandatory minimums, I believe, for any of these felonies.
He'd be out on bond during appeal.
Yeah, and so for all of those reasons, I don't think that the condition that I would expect that these likely voters were thinking of has much of a chance of being met. I think I tend to agree with you. I think you mentioned a few weeks ago that you felt Trump would likely get convicted of something somewhere, but being convicted by a jury and actually ending up the entire appellate process, having that upheld and going to prison, that's a whole different story. We hope you enjoyed this preview of our supporters exclusive midweek show. If you'd like to hear the rest of the episode, we hope you'll consider becoming a supporter. Supporters get ad-free access to all of our shows, membership in our Politics Guys Discord group where you can join in on the conversation, and other benefits at different levels of support. To become a supporter, go to patreon.com/politicsguys. You can also support us through Venmo or @politicsguys or through PayPal. You'll find all of our support links in the show notes as well as at politicsguys.com/support. And if you'd like to get the midweek show, but you're not in a position to become a financial supporter, that's not a problem. Just send me an email at mike@politicsguys.com and I'll be happy to get that set up for you.